we go. Okay, I hope you can all see the presentation. What I'm gonna talk about is a company that focuses on smart health insurance and takes a little bit the concept of price aggregation to the next step, which I think in my mind is an evolution into benchmarking. And I'll touch upon a little bit the concept behind it in a minute. What I'd like to do first to introduce myself is why am I here? Why am I doing this? As Norbert kindly mentioned, my name is Maurizio Raffone. I'm now based in Tokyo since 3 months. Although I've had experiences, previous experience living in Japan a couple of times, I've always been for the last 20 years in the financial industry, particularly capital markets, with a number of banks. And I recently decided, after a spell as a partner in an asset management firm in London, to actually try and do something on my own. And I focus on startup investments as well as advisory in the FinTech space. I find it extremely challenging and exciting. And and the Tokyo ecosystem that Norbert is part of fertilizing and improving is extremely interesting, both from a technical point of view, but also a general market acceptance point of view. But I don't really want this presentation isn't about me. It's about one of the companies that I'm involved with. I'm a personal advisor to the CEO, and for full disclosure, I have to admit I'm actually looking into taking a position in the company. So I guess I'm a little bit biased, but I think what it comes down to is something that I guess got me going and interested in the company and the sector is what's going on with the health insurance market globally. We have various analyses. I've tried to put here just some generic idea about certain trends. The first trend, which I think we've seen in the West more, but it will translate, I think, across all continents, is the fact that there's going to be an ever decreasing role of the state in the provision of health insurance. Of course, this is due to fiscal issues that a lot of the governments have, but also the fact that a lot of the health coverage provision is inefficient when centralized. I don't think is anything new, but I think what's interesting is that's reflected in the fact that you have very solid growth in gross written premium for health insurance in all regions, North America, Latin America, as you can see, Africa, Europe, Asia Pacific. Obviously, some of the more developing parts of the world have the higher growth rates, coming off lower bases. I think there's a very strong projection put forward by very interesting analysis by McKinsey that points out that you're seeing private health insurance revenues projected to double by 2025. So what I think is the combination of these two macro trends really make it interesting for a play into the sector. And obviously I'm looking at it a little bit from an investor point of view, what sector I want to be involved in, how I want to be involved in. But I would recommend everyone to keep in the back of their mind as a very strong potential market for development. And I think the value proposition here generally from all companies should really be an improvement of your health coverage through additional quality provision. And by quality, I mean being able to fit exactly customer needs. Easier said than done, of course. And I think the company I'm going to be talking a little bit about, and forgive me if I couldn't arrange for the CEO to present himself. It's a little bit early, given the time zone. The company is European-based. So I'll try and do as good a job as possible to talk about it. And the company is called My Matchmaker, and I tell you, it's not a dating app or a dating company. The name is actually one of the things I'm really talking to my partner about changing because I think it's a little bit interesting. But the company itself is aiming to become the first and more widely used platform to rate the quality of insurance coverage. And the focus has been so far on health insurance, but I think it's very easily scalable and applicable to different types of insurance markets. And that's because, and the aim is really to be what is being described as the master database of insurance, and looking at the fact that these health insurance products are very complicated in terms of what they cover, and how they're put together, and also how they're transmitted and discussed with with clients. It was felt that it'd be an interesting proposition to bring together a single access point for both insurance companies, brokers, and clients. And you'll see that the business plan relies on a couple of different strategies. So that use the same concept of facilitating access to what is naturally a fairly complicated insurance product. Now, why is this needed in the first place? Insurance contracts are very difficult to analyze. I think we've all had some degree of private health insurance coverage that comes in a nice, often one-page summary, and then you look at a 30-page actual document. And I'm stating the obvious with the fact that the devil is in detail, because when you actually need the insurance and you need to understand how much you're covered for and what circumstances, that's when the one-page summary you get given isn't quite enough, and you really need to delve into the details, which is stressful, particularly when you do it at the time when you need it. So the idea of the company is for the platform to be able to take a lot of the stress out of that process, because the analysis is done up front. We come to that, the company comes to that conclusion because of the experience described here. If you look at how internet websites compare insurance products, it's fairly complicated. Main focus is on price. There is a verbatim copy-paste exercise of different clauses onto the web page, which is often unintelligible and very difficult to understand. And on top of it, every insurance provider has a different way of presenting that information. So comparing different coverage isn't quite easy, and it's time-consuming and often can be deceiving. And that boils into the next point in terms of how people look at it. It is very time-consuming for both the brokers and end customers to understand exactly what they're being covered for. There's a fairly small range of products. I mean, you basically can get an insurance policy with or without dental, and there's usually 2 or 3 different types that you get offered and with different amounts. But the type of wealth of diversity that you'd see in other financial markets isn't quite there. It's quite backwards. The actual process of if someone needs to update their situation, needs to change their interest, say they want different coverage, or they want to, they have a child and to include that person in the coverage. All the contracts are quite, updating is tedious, is difficult, takes time. And there's a little bit of a potential conflict of interest, particularly in the relationship between the insurance companies, the large insurance companies, and there's about 10 global insurance companies that provide this, the largest share of the health, private health coverage, and that could lead a little bit to conflicts of interest in terms of what is the quality of the product that gets delivered to the ultimate clients. So what's the company doing? What's My Matchmaker doing? They have developed an algorithm based on, very simply, and I'll walk you through the slide, but very simply, they developed an algorithm to break down an insurance product into its components. Health insurance, and again, I call it product rather than policy, because I look at it from, again, my background, a structured product perspective in finance. So what does that mean? It's basically, we just had a question pop up from Chico Coley. Do you make the coverage assessment based on reliable contract information, or is it documented that claim data substantially extra coverage? I'll get that in a minute, Chico, if you don't mind. I just wanted to take a step back a little bit and convey the point that health insurance policies are essentially a combination of correlated payoffs. And for those of you who may not be so familiar with derivative contracts, what I mean is different line items that you're covered for have a probability for the insurance company to take place. So there's a payoff, you pay a premium, and you could potentially receive money in case of a certain event. And because they're all related to one entity, that is the insured person or the insured family, there's a correlation element between the likelihood of any of these line items to be claimed for. So but as a buyer, we just get one policy, and it's a take it or leave it type scenario. So what the platform does is actually look at the data information available from brokers and insurance companies that have signed up to the platform. So they've made available their health insurance policies. So all the contracts are actually broken down through the copyrighted algorithm that my matchmakers come up with. And they're actually broken down into their components and evaluated based on the payoffs, so to say, again, to use a derivatives-based approach. Because, to get back to your question, Chica, so yes, the database itself has been fed policies from leading providers and from brokers. Those have been broken down, analyzed, and evaluated. And through this AI that has been created by my partner, and that's been augmented over time, and it will be even more so as new policies are added and as new feedback in terms of the actual take-up rate of the different policies by different people takes place. So we very much hope that over time this will become a benchmarking tool. I'm skipping a little bit ahead here in the presentation, but really a benchmarking tool similar to what a credit rating would be for a corporate bond. If you're familiar with what Moody's and S&P do in terms of rating the likelihood of default of bonds, the idea is a little bit similar. You try to rate the actual quality of coverage for the specific needs, in this case, of customers. So going back a little bit, I went off tangent a little bit, but so rather than just have an aggregation of price based on a request by a client that basically doesn't create any scoring, it doesn't give you any visibility as to the value of that coverage, the platform works as follows. The users make a query, the database that has been vetted with policies that have been uploaded over the last year and a half, and they've created a range of possibility, which is about quantified as about 1.7 million scenarios, and those are then matched with the profile that the person has put in terms of information disclosure, the usual pressure points in terms of age, number of people need to be covered, location, and a number of other things. So in essence, what we see the market currently doing is basically have just an approach where The price factor is the discriminating factor, which is understandable, but very subpar in terms of the quality of coverage. There's no analysis provided. Whereas the solution that the platform of My Matchmaker has been working on is to help you rank the matching of your needs vis-a-vis the policies that are part of the database. So there is a quantitative work that is done in the background to break down the contracts, to evaluate the likelihood of the various payoffs. But the output that the person receives when they make a query is a qualitative output, which is on top of obviously the price information and the details about the provider. So the value proposition that the platform hopes to bring to the table is move away from the current generation of comparison websites focused on price, where the benefits are not explained, and where the cover, the health cover is somewhat approximate, to a quality and applicability approach focused, with a rating of the benefits and explanation thereof, and hopefully provide something that works exactly as requested or required by the clients. So here's an example, and I'm mindful a little bit of time, so I'll try and go through a little bit quickly. You take one current generation comparator, you'll see just the price. They'll explain benefit, whatever it is XYZ, so any line item is covered up to a certain amount. And perhaps they're showing you a health insurance coverage that includes maternity, but you are a single man. So they're not really spending a lot of time trying to understand who's on the other side of the equation, who's asking for a quote. And Matchmaker takes a different approach. There's, as I said, work done prior to onboarding insurance contracts, and that is done through the AI process that I mentioned, that will review and rate the covers individually and break them down into the value components, and try to address the point in terms of whether the actual line item by line item that coverage that is provided is sufficiently needed. And there is a process of due diligence of this policy that gets done by the platform. So it's not merely taking information and passing it on. And rather than produce a list of 10 policies to try and jam the client with as many choices as possible, so at least he picks one, the focus output will be on only those policies that are actually relevant to him or her. Who are the clients for this type of product or platform? Well, we identified really three types. And I'll try, we'll start all the way from the right. The normal and I guess most likely client would be consumers, individuals, small companies who will benefit from the greater transparency and understanding exactly the insurance benefits that are being provided through the various policies, and hopefully find the one that exactly matches their needs. But to go all the way to the left, there's also, I think, a lot of value for the actual insurance companies, that through the platform they'll be able to see how their policy stacks up vis-a-vis other policies. So it's a benchmarking exercise, a little bit like a rating score. So how does your health coverage for individuals, for example, male individuals in that age range, stack up vis-a-vis the market? And an even greater focus and value, I think, is for the brokerage market. I mean, just to give you a sense, in, I think, data is 2012, the global brokerage, health insurance brokerage market was about $45 billion. So it's actually, a lot of policies are going through brokers. And we all know, I think we all have a sort of a financial background. A lot of brokers are more like telephone jockeys in a sense. There's a lot of value added provided brokers. So this tool will actually allow them to not just do a copy paste or jamming exercise towards clients and try to work on pure volume and quantity of trying to hit some sales, but actually try to get them to understand what are the best policies from which insurers for the type of clients that they service. So we think that that has tangible values in hit rate for brokers through increase their productivity. And that's what I personally like about the platform. Is actually it's not focused on just one client base, but it has applicability on multiple sectors. So here's an example of the actual interface, which I would recommend everyone to go and have a look. This is the B2C screen, so for individuals or small companies. It's very simple. It's the first sort of product that is focused on health insurance for expatriates, which is a high margin business. And platform itself right now is both in English and French. And there are 8 insurance companies on the platform. You will see AXA, Allianz, Aetna, Cigna, and so forth. So the interface itself starts, and again, I'll try not to spend too much time on it because I think it's you can play around with it if you're interested. But essentially, it asks you first the scope of the coverage and the quality of the coverage you're looking for. In essence, are you looking for something that is holistic, that takes care of all your possible needs, or something you just want for minimal amount of work? So it's trying to, and obviously geographical profile, which for expat health insurance is very important. Exactly who you are, where you're from, where you want to operate, and so forth. So, okay, here we've used, or it's been used, a term that I think some of you may find a little bit interesting. I think the vision here is the Uberization of insurance to some extent. So to try to avoid some of the common bottlenecks that you find in the health insurance market. What are the common issues here? Lack of product knowledge. I think I'm a fairly sophisticated financial person. I think many of you are the same. But when looking at a health insurance product, I struggle. There's very little to understand in terms of what value that coverage provides. Is the example that was written before is $5,000 for covering for certain treatment. What does it mean? What's the actual average payout? What is what does it actually do to me? Is it big number? Is it small number? It's very difficult to have that knowledge unless you're in that sector. There's often also lack of time. I mean, again, go back to the point that a lot of these policies are 30 pages long with very, very small print. It takes a lot of time and effort to diagnose and understand that. And obviously, in order for being able to distribute health insurance products, if you need brokerage licenses and always a set of standardized contracts. The solution that MatchMaker points forward is use the tool as really a decision-making tool to support your qualitative needs for coverage, provide support desk, and use the MatchMaker's license. They have a health insurance brokerage license in France to be able to actually allow brokers who are not maybe licensed for that market or who wish to become brokers to access it in a cost-effective way. we think that this is what the platform should look like once it's fully developed, is to have the know-how of the evaluation process, the benchmarking process, sit within the matchmaker platform, but then discuss and correlate their findings and information with the various brokers that access it, as well as the insurance companies, to allow the brokers to really have a higher level understanding of their of what they're selling, which is often a problem in terms of low hit rates. So obviously, this is a little bit of a wish in terms of what will happen on in this market, and it may happen in 6 months, it may happen in 5 years, it may never happen. But the vision here is right now you have a limited number of distribution agents that work in the health insurance business. Commissions tend to be fairly high, and I guess there's a little bit of a difficulty in among the brokerage community, for example, to move from different types of insurance companies to perhaps the higher quality insurance, big names. So there's a little bit of a glass ceiling in terms of how that works. And the future is really just to have greater competition, a diversification of the distribution network, not only having to rely on, for example, your own salespeople, but to use eventually the platform to become a sales tool as well. And obviously that hopefully generates more sales and higher productivity. So the business model really is to focus on, as I said, the delivery to insurance companies, to brokers, and to end clients. So the first two, the B2B, B2B2C, means dealing with the insurance companies and the brokers, who then move on to end clients through revenues generated by a licensing fee or perhaps commission sharing with the brokers. With the individuals, when the individuals directly access the platform and choose their own coverage, is purely based on commission. And we think that retention rate for could be very high and recurring. So once you've bought a policy off the platform and that policy gets renewed over time, there's a continuous stream of commissions that are coming in. And I think the diversity of income, again, from an investor's point of view, is extremely important, and from a business, I think, future point of view is important as well, because things will change over time. Regulatory regulations could change. There could be a number of exogenous factors. There could be a change in the way insurance companies position themselves in this market. So being able to deal with all the key stakeholders in this ecosystem, I think it's very important. So where's the company today? Well, the company started a while ago, back in November 2013. It's got its license in 2014, and shortly thereafter started their IT development. And about 2 years ago, the first version of the website went online. So a lot of the R&D has been happening behind the scenes already. I mean, it's hard to find companies that have 3-4 years of work already done that is at this stage and looking for the commercial explosion. So the company itself has been receiving a number of rewards. In Europe, there are, as I mentioned, 4 insurance companies signed up, and there's an existing customer portfolio that are mostly focused on brokers. So there are already some revenues that are coming in, and the whole idea is, as you see, the commissions have started very small, but now they've accumulated a little bit, and with customers a little bit from everywhere, which again shows the point. Although the platform was developed in France, it's really applicable anywhere. And I think the point now is it's at the stage where it needs to scale up, keep refining the work on the AI to keep improving the analysis and increasing the database coverage, which is fundamental to have as great slice of the market as possible that could go through the platform. And again, as I mentioned, the first step into this hopefully will be an insurance revolution, is focusing on private health insurance for expats. So this is the international one. And this is just an example of some of the key points that discoverers need to have in terms of you'll see that the requirements that are generally needed from a qualitative point of view to be able to be put on the platform. So why this was the first test case? Why not car insurance, for example? It really came a little bit from the founder's personal experience, where he himself wanted to have a smart health insurance coverage and couldn't find it. And that's where the ball got starting. But in terms of being able to make a business out of it, it was very interesting because there's a very wide customer base, over 100 million. That includes not only the usual expatriates, but also high net worth individuals who want to have a higher degree of coverage, who tend to travel a lot, who may be students, so their kids may be going to US universities, if they're based in Japan, for example. They want to make sure that they have full coverage wherever they're going to be. The growth rate in the sector has been higher for the expat health insurance vis-a-vis the general health insurance market, which has also been growing at a fairly strong rate. And we think that the commissions generally are very fat, and therefore there is a potential to take some of that out of the equation altogether and capture it for the business. So it could be a little bit of a niche market to begin with, which I think is a smart idea to focus on, unlike the car insurance, for example, approach, but one where the profit margins, I think, make it worthwhile. So again, just to reiterate a little bit, what makes the platform a little bit unique is the benefits are analyzed quantitatively, but from a qualitative angle. And again, the policies are uploaded into database, they're analyzed, they're broken down, they're priced for the line items. And that allows, hopefully, a better match with the actual customer's needs. It is independent. The platform is not owned by any insurance brokerage company or insurance company itself. And is a tool that can follow a person through time as their needs change, as they get older, generally. Their same policies won't be as optimal, and therefore it is a tool that is meant exactly to do that, to tell you where the pressure points are, what is the value of the line items that you're being offered, and allow you therefore to make a better choice. And hopefully save you a little bit of a hassle in terms of what you actually covered with. So hopefully you understand a little bit better what are the benefits, what do they actually do, and generally make it a much more transparent process, which I think is why the platform itself is compatible with the new European Insurance Distribution Directive, which goes hand in hand with the new MiFID II rules for banks. What they're doing, the European regulators are trying to do is for all the financial products out there on the insurance side, on the banking side, just to make it clear, more transparent, and understand exactly how much money they're paying and what they're getting out of it. I think it's many other jurisdictions will adopt the same criteria. there because they're beneficial to the end consumer. Competition out there. You can see, I don't know if you're familiar with this, other companies. They have a slightly different focus most of the times. And we think we've done a little bit of due diligence. We don't really see anyone out there except for a UK-based company that, however, does not provide any online pricing tool. It's an offline provision of the review of the benefits. We think the matchmaker actually ticks all the right boxes. It's scalable, although it's focused initially on the expat health insurance market. It's positioned for both end consumers and insurance companies, and we think that the qualitative review of the benefits is a big differentiator. In terms of the milestones, the 2018, there will be the insurance premium will be accessible to all the users on the platform. So there will be a full match of the qualitative analysis of the platform, of the insurance policies together with the actual pricing. And ideally, in 2019 is to try and look at some of the other insurance products. And beyond that, I guess the big hope is that the platform itself could become a rating platform, a qualitative benchmarking platform for used by everyone, the providers, the intermediators, brokers, but also clients, to understand the value of insurance coverage, be it in health and some of the other sectors that hopefully the company will be able to focus on. How are customers now being acquired? There's a couple of different approaches. On the client side, it's all done mostly online with some offline expat-focused magazines and conventions. For the businesses, it's through a lot of relationships with the insurance companies itself. David, who's David Elaine, who's the founder and CEO of the company, has been for years working with insurance companies in Europe, focused on structured products, and that's how he's been able to bring on board 8 of the largest insurance companies to the platform. In terms of clients, this is a simple video, and if you don't mind, I'll try and play. I hope the audio will come through. Let me see. Oh, no audio. Okay. Well, if you go, sorry about that. If you go on the website, mymatchmaker.com, there is an introduction video. So I'll let you get on with it. But just to give you an understanding, it gives you a little bit of understanding of, from a B2C perspective, how individual clients could access the platform and what it actually does. As I mentioned, these are some of the insurance companies that are now on the platform. They're being and brokers who are involved, and that's extremely helpful because that's where the information database has been coming from, and how it's been which has allowed the platform to create and validate the tool that it developed over the last few years. So it hasn't been done in a vacuum. It's been all this work for the refinement of the artificial intelligence and the algorithms has been on the basis of being given access to dozens of policies. The founder is my good friend David, based in France. He lives between Paris and Monaco, and after a long time in investment banking, focusing on insurance companies, he's gone on and got himself a master's degree and started focusing on launching his own company and advisory services. Again, the experience and the reason why he's been focusing on expat health insurance has really been from his own experience and the poor customer coverage he's been receiving. And that's why he's put a lot of effort into it. I just got a question. I don't know if everyone can read it. Are insurance providers using this tool for gap coverage analysis? Right now, they're not, and that's something that is the goal of the platform itself, which is right now is really a sales tool for insurance companies to better sell the product to brokers who understand a little bit better how to meet clients' needs, or directly from the insurance companies to clients. But we do believe, and definitely David believes, that it will become a more actively used tool to exactly see what are people actually using, and what are the winning policies that go out there and get sold. And so it's got benchmarking in terms of price performance analysis, but also in terms of being able to see whether that analysis was valuable. So how much within that policy that was delivered to clients is being utilized, and how that's changing over time. So we hope that that's the likely evolution that the platform will obtain, and that's how we think we can monetize the value of the information that sits on it, and they will keep growing within the platform. David has brought on board two heavyweights as corporate advisors who are both very knowledgeable about the private health insurance market, for example, Mr. Jorgensen, and Mr. Million, who's a Frenchman, is also being developed directly in the insurance business and the healthcare business. And I think what's very helpful about the vision that these two gentlemen bring on board is the reality check, which a lot of, I think, startups and new businesses don't have, with the actual stakeholders in the ecosystem. I think a lot of startups focus entirely on consumers. They want to get the most out of natural individual client base, and that's great. But often they don't really understand what are the requirements from the other side of the equation. In this case, the insurance companies and the brokers, who are essential parts of that ecosystem. So I'm very happy that David has brought on board these two gentlemen for advice and relationships. And a lot of the work has been going into refining those relationships and understand exactly what the platform can do for each of these groups of people. There's a little bit of work that needs to be done to finalize the team in terms of taking on board a full-time technology officer, bigger effort on the sales front, and a full-time position as a modeler and quant, which is being done to date by David himself. But obviously, as the company grows, he can't keep sitting behind the desk and analyzing policies. He needs to delegate some of that work and create actually a support desk function. The company is looking to raise, and again, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that because this is not a marketing presentation. He's going to be raising some money. If you guys are interested to have a conversation, we can have a conversation offline. So I'll just skip that. Make sure we don't get in trouble with any regulator on the call. Here are the contact details of David. I had my contact details up front. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you want to talk a little bit more about why I'm interested in the company, where I think this could go, and why I think the platform makes a lot of sense, very happy to do so. But if you have, I think we have another 5 minutes or so. If you have any questions or things you'd like to, or comments you'd like to make, please go ahead.
Maurizio, one question. It feels like obviously the algorithm and the pricing of like the different line items creates lots of transparency for these products. On the other hand, it feels like product management in insurance historically has been to obfuscate and make this as difficult to understand as possible, right? A new product is essentially adding new riders to a policy to make it even more complicated to understand. That's why often you need an agent in the middle and so on. So
Yes.
was it a bit surprising in a good way to see that there's so many big insurance companies who joined the platform? I'm trying to get my mind around how beneficial it is for them to create that transparency.
No, I think it's a very good point. I think what's been surprising is the fact that the industry really hasn't changed much for years and years. And if anything, the level of complexity has increased as the complexity of the needs of people have increased. We generally take care of ourselves more now than we used to. We live longer. There are more ailments that get treated, and therefore the product coverage has increased in complexity. And I think there hasn't been a lot of pressure to change that. And it is a fairly, how should I say, it's not quite, I think, monopoly, but there's a lot of markets are really dominated by 2-3 players regionally, and that always is a negative for competition. And the reason, when I asked the questions, how did you get these guys on board, is he's actually been, as obviously Dave is a very credible person, and he's been working for years on the platform and its development. I think the reason why they're coming on board is because the insurance companies deep down know that their business setup will change. I think there is a recognition that, and it's not just going to be in private health insurance for expats, it's been in all markets. And that's why I think the platform itself has a lot of mileage for the future, because a lot of the required transparency that now the European Union regulators are pushing for will mean eventually that your 30-page policies with riders with a complicated legal language will have to change. And the question really for them is, do you want to be behind the curve or ahead of the curve? And you have people like AXA, Aviva, you have Aetna, Cigna, all major players in the area, and they want to be part of it because it will change, whether it's through this platform, hopefully, or other platforms, or pushed by regulation even further. But it'll change. And if I have to look ahead, maybe a few more years, I think particularly combining the power of a platform like this one with distributed ledger technology will allow people not anymore to buy one policy from one counterpart. They'll be able to pick different line items and different coverages from different insurance companies. I don't see why I have to buy inpatient treatment and my cancer coverage from the same guy. But again, and this is probably not going to happen right away. It'll happen at some point. But I think in all types of financial insurance services, you'll see the ability to obtain more transparency from a consumer's point of view and demand cheaper products. I mean, if you think about it, something like this could take away the whole brokerage market at some point. And that's already $45 billion worth of savings for consumers.
I mean, what you're talking about ultimately is it's like an unbundling of that insurance policy into components, right? Which, unlike the P&C side, maybe companies like Trolf are doing, where you, instead of insuring your whole home, you're insuring individual items and only for a specific period of time.
Or the other thing, Norbert, is really you can still insure your whole home, but then you can do different slices of risk with other people. In other words, Now you have insurance companies that insure you, 100% of them. Actually, it's never 100%. It's maybe 90%. You take your first 10% losses, but then they go back and reinsure themselves with someone else for their 3 standard deviation risk.
Yeah.
Well, and why do they do that? Because they're not as efficient managing their risk. I myself, if I have the technology that gives me transparency of various pricing and who I'm dealing with, so the creditworthiness, and also understanding whether that coverage really is what it's supposed to be, I can go and execute that with a number of counterparts and get my 10 to 50% coverage from XYZ, my 50 to 100% from someone else, and get better pricing. Now, in this specific case, I think the platform does a lot of the work. It needs to do a lot of the work before the policies go online. And that's why it's, the value of the database, the analysis, and the refinement of the algorithm is important. This is not something which for me as an investor is very important. It's not something that just come out and they need to validate. They've been spending 3 years validating the AI, which I think is very important because these policies are complex. So I think that step for anyone trying to unbundle, as you correctly say, the value of coverage is in the development phase. And I think David and the team he's hired have done that.
Is there a component in there that provides essentially like an audit trail for an agent or broker? Like, I'm not familiar with the European directive that you quoted, but in Japan you have it as well, that you need to, in very basic terms, understand the client needs. You need to kind of demonstrate that the products you propose are in the client's interest, and then also document the decision. And essentially such a tool would allow you to very simply kind of give an audit trail that says like, here's why I proposed this product, and here's why it's scored, because it's got the highest through this algorithm, and basically I'm relying on this algorithm, would be very easy to prove to the regulator that you're acting in the best interest of the client.
Absolutely. And because it's not purely based on price, it's actually based on the need of covering different situations and assessing that as an output perspective on a qualitative basis. The platform is already compliant with the European directive, and which is very strict in terms of being able to prove that you haven't oversold or undersold, right? That you've actually just sold what it was right for the client. And in fact, transactions are taking place on the platform. It's got, I think the latest numbers about this year was, I think, about 70,000 euros worth of policy premium. So, small change, but enough to validate the actual modeling. And what brokers like about it is the fact that it is an additional avenue for them to go and reach perhaps different clients rather than their own sales channel. So, a lot of work has been going to create scalability within the platform. As you obviously will need to be adjusted for different markets. They hasn't been looking at Japan, but hopefully since I'm here, we can look at that as well. So absolutely, I mean, it allows this audit trail and the execution of the transaction based on the client needs and a demonstration of why that is a good match. So, I see it just extremely valuable also for other types of insurance. But I mean, if this was only applicable to the private health insurance, I personally wouldn't be that interested, because it is a fairly big market and high margins, but it is what it is. But I think the same approach can be applied to any kind of complex insurance product, which is most of the best.
Super. Fascinating approach for sure. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Maurizio.
Thank you all.